Focus on Headline. All right, let's take a look at what major issues are making the headlines today on Focus on Headline. And for this, joining us in the studio, the Yoon sisters back in action. Yoon Se-young, Yoon Hae-jung joining us. Guys, welcome back.
Good evening. We're both wearing pink today, and you're wearing black.
You're not wearing pink. That's beige.
Beige.
Are you colorblind?
No, it's called baby pink, and you're wearing black, so we're black pink. I just realized that.
That is literally the same color as your skin right now.
Really? Maybe my skin color is pink?
Your skin, you have the blush on, and that's a little bit more pink. I don't know where you got pink from there. I'm going to be honest with you. You might have to go check your eyes.
And let's hear from our listeners.
What is that called when you get old and your eyes get noha?
Oh my. Yeah,
I think she's too young though.
but I can't deny that.
She's approaching there. Let's start things off with some domestic politics here. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo on Monday presided over a cabinet meeting to present and approve a request for the reconsideration of the special counsel investigation. This regarding the death of a young Marine corporal, Choi Soo-gun. Following the Prime Minister's announcement, President Yoon this afternoon once again using his presidential veto power. And this is the 10th time that he's exercised his veto power since taking office a little over 2 years ago. So you're going to give us the latest updates on this.
Sure. The Corporal Chair Special Prosecutor Act has been recognized as one of the most significant issues to be addressed by the 22nd National Assembly even before it officially commenced. And both lawmakers and the public, as well as the media, have shown considerable interest on this special act. And as anticipated, the request for reconsideration of the Special Prosecutor Act aimed at investigating the allegations of external pressure in the probe into Marine Corporal Choi Soo-gun's death has passed today's cabinet meeting. But representing the government side, Prime Minister Han Duck-soo today highlighted issues with the content, timing, and legislative process of the special act, which passed the opposition-controlled National Assembly earlier this month, while lawmakers of the ruling People Power Party boycotted the vote and walked out of the assembly chamber in protest. And Prime Minister Han argued that the act was forcibly passed solely by the opposition Democratic Party, and that it also grants the opposition exclusive rights to nominate special prosecutor candidates, infringing upon the president's appointment authorities. Further, Prime Minister Han stated that the case of Corporal Choi is already under investigation by the police and the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials. So additionally, the additional special counsel probe bill is unnecessary, and it even violates the principles of exceptionality inherent to the special prosecutor system.
However, despite what Prime Minister Han Duck-soo said, many point out that his announcement this morning was merely a step towards President Yoon's exercise of the veto power on the special prosecutor probe, right?
Right. As anticipated, President Yoon once again exercised his veto power this afternoon. And today's decision marked the 10th time he exercised his right of reconsideration, also known as the veto power, since taking office over the past 2 years. And now how the continuous use of veto power on sensitive issues will be perceived is now up to the public's judgment. Meanwhile, the ruling People Power Party reaffirmed its stance of unacceptability towards the Special Prosecutor Act on Corporal Choi's case previous day. But on the other hand, the Democratic Party is expected to reintroduce the bill during the plenary session on the 28th. And even if it is rejected and discarded by the 21st National Assembly, they plan to push it again as the first bill of the 22nd National Assembly. So it is expected that the government, the ruling party, and the main opposition party will continue to clash over those issues for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, so if basically, President Yoon has now vetoed this, and they're going to call for a revote, which in this case, in a revote, they need 2/3 of the majority vote at the National Assembly. This is why, again, when we were covering the whole April 10th general elections, the magic number 200, right, being the big thing, which then they are able to do basically everything, which... Right. Also, then they say that's too much power for the National Assembly, and it could go as far as to even the impeachment of a president, although you need a good excuse in order to raise that up. But they were saying that they're able to pass through any bill, despite any presidential veto, if they have 2/3. However, they don't. Now, the big question now is, we do know that the PPP lawmakers they boycotted, right? Although I think there was one PPP lawmaker, Kim Ung, I believe, who voted in favor of the bill. He was the only one. An Chul-soo, who is a PPP lawmaker, I think made a big deal and said that he's going to vote and he's going to vote in favor of the bill, but he actually boycotted together. There's some consensus that maybe because of the public sentiment towards this and the fact that if they continue to not pass this bill, that it's not going to look good for the PPP.
Right.
Maybe some of the PPP lawmakers would actually vote in favor of this on the revote. And the argument that the DP has been using is basically this, right? If you're not guilty, why would you be afraid to be investigated is what it is. However, again, the PPP and the government's stance on this is there's already an investigation going into this. Why put more time, effort, and money into it when it's already being investigated? But there's been already some controversies in regards to the investigation that's been done by the CIO, including regarding, the now former Australian ambassador to South Korea, right? But even before President Yoon officially exercised his veto earlier this afternoon, many opposition leaders did come out to slam President Yoon amid the speculation that he is going to likely use his veto power. And Hae-jung, tell us what the opposition leaders had to say.
Right. During the parliamentary floor meeting that took place this morning, Park Chan-dae, floor leader of the main opposition Democratic Party, said that if President Yoon Suk Yeol declares war against the opposition and the people, the Democratic Party will take every measure to respond to the Yoon administration. He also added that it's a foolish regime that wants to wage an all-out war against the people, referring to the highly anticipated veto by President Yoon on the Special Prosecutor Act into Marine Corporal Che's death. He added that the Korean people and the DP have given enough time and chances to accept the Special Prosecutor Act, and that if President Yoon goes ahead and vetoes the bill, he will be considered the worst president in Korean history. And today at 2 p.m., 7 opposition parties along with civil society organizations also held a press conference at the National Assembly, slamming President Yoon's anticipated veto. They also plan to hold a large outdoor rally in the center of Seoul this Saturday. The main opposition DP also plans to push for a revote on the Special Prosecutor Act next Tuesday at the National Assembly's plenary session. And even if the vote falls through and the Special Prosecutor bill is scrapped, the DP plans to introduce the same bill as soon as the 22nd National Assembly kicks off. In the meantime, Cho-guk, leader of the Rebuilding Korea Party, held a debate on the constitutionality of the presidential veto earlier in the day. During the debate, he stressed that the Constitution states that the president has the right to veto, but it's not a power that should be abused, calling on President Yoon to accept and promulgate the Special Prosecutor Act.
Yeah, so both sides are basically going back and forth and saying that they're abusing power, right? Like the PPP lawmakers, the thing that they always say is that the DP lawmakers are abusing their majority seat power, right? And now they're coming out and saying that the president is using his veto power, abusing his veto power. But this is where checks and balances come in. But it's a matter of now what's good for the people. And I think this is now the argument. Checks and balances is really good, but they're saying what are the people calling for right now? I believe there were some even not protests or demonstrations per se, but like a small protest or a demonstration from even like the Marine Corps. And some of the soldiers that are coming out in regards to this. So we'll see what happens. But as the floor leaders of the ruling and opposition parties have officially begun the negotiations to form the committee of the 22nd National Assembly, we had that going on Monday afternoon. People Power Party floor leader Chu Kyung-ho and DP floor leader Park Chan-dae, they met privately to exchange views on the issue of forming the committee. Hae-young, let's get more on this.
Yes, with less than 10 days left until the new National Assembly opens on May 30th. 31st, the floor leadership of both parties has officially started negotiations to discuss the composition of the committee. And the meeting, along with the floor leaders from both parties, also included the chief deputy floor leaders Bae Jun-young from the People Power Party and Park Song-jun from the Democratic Party. But the negotiations are expected to be challenging because taking a look at the each party's stance, the Democratic Party holding 171 seats, the majority in the assembly insist on chairing 11 out of the 18 standing committees, including the Legislation and Judiciary Committee and the Steering Committee. Conversely, the People Power Party argues that according to tradition, the ruling party should chair these committees. And according to the National Assembly Act, the Speaker of the National Assembly must be elected at the first plenary session of the Extraordinary National Assembly held immediately after its opening. Subsequently, the standing committee chairs must be elected within 3 days, and the first plenary session of the 22nd National Assembly is scheduled for June 5th, making the deadline for the committee formation negotiations June 7th. And despite the clear and significant differences between the two parties, it is imperative that these negotiations are concluded within the time frame to ensure the proper functioning and fulfillment of the National Assembly's duties.
Let's move on here. It's been, guys, believe it or not, now over 3 months since the junior doctors walked out of their workplaces in their collective action against their government's plan to increase the medical school admissions quota by at least to 2,000 for the 2025 academic year. I believe Monday was the very deadline. There is a reason why there was a deadline set by the health ministry in regards to this, because these doctors who, by the way, despite this deadline given by the government, they continue to be away from their work sites. They may actually now face some delays in getting their medical fellowships. Haejung, let's get the latest on this.
Right. The health ministry has been calling on junior doctors to return to work. The vast majority of the 12,000 trainee doctors are still continuing their collective action. As of Monday, only 5% of the trainee doctors who have left their work sites for 3 months have returned to hospitals. Also, according to the Ministry of Health, as of Monday, 100 major training hospitals have reported that 659 doctors came back to work, which is up 31 compared to last Friday. And among the so-called Big Five hospitals in Seoul, not one doctor has returned to work as of 1:50 p.m. Monday. The Ministry of Health is keeping track of whether the trainee doctors are returning, but there hasn't been much change. The ministry said that the number of doctors going back to work every day still remains in the single-digit range. And officials have warned that junior doctors may face a 1-year delay in getting medical fellowships because they will not be eligible for next year's test to become fellow doctors. Trainee doctors are required to take additional training if there is a gap in their training period. And if the gap exceeds 3 months within a training year, they are not eligible to take a specialist examination held at the beginning of each year. So if we take a look at the timeline, trainee doctors left the hospitals en masse on February 19th, and medical residents in their 3rd and 4th year who resigned on February 19th had until May 20th, which is the deadline yesterday, to return to work to meet the requirements to acquire a specialist license next year. Now, this means that the country will not be able to produce 2,900 specialists next year, which is the number of 3rd and 4th year residents nationwide who are set to take their test next year. The government has said that some adjustments can be made to the training period in the case of unavoidable reasons, such as a sick leave, but they made it clear that the collective action does not constitute as an unavoidable reason. And also under the relevant law, junior doctors are only allowed to log up to 3 months of absences if they want to qualify for next year's specialty certification exam. So on Monday, Second Vice Minister of Health and Welfare Bang Min-soo came out to say that to obtain a specialist license next year, the doctors must return to work immediately.
Man, it's so ugly because you're looking at a situation where the government is looking to increase the medical school admissions quota in order to produce more doctors because of not just what the government is saying, but the public sentiment that there is a lack of doctors right now. And because of this and because of the collective action, you're actually seeing less doctors right now. Plus, you have to now understand that the medical school students are boycotting these, because of the government's plan. So who wins in this, right? I mean, because it seems like we're quickly approaching the end of May deadline that I believe the health ministry and the education ministry has put in to finalize the quota increase, the admissions deadline, right, for the 2025 school year. And so it seems like it's going to happen unless something crazy happens in the next 10 days, which I don't think it's going to happen. They're going to go forth with a little bit under 2,000. I think it's a little bit under 2,000 this year because they gave a little bit of a leeway for some of these schools out there. But do they continue? It seems like the junior doctors are going to continue, and only a handful, really just a small fraction of the junior doctors who basically said, we can't do this anymore. I put too much study into this. I'm just going to go back to work. There's only about 30 of them, I think, was what it was. The numbers that we gave came out right now. And unfortunately, again, I say this all the time and I sound like a broken record, but it's only the people who are suffering from all of this. Judicial decision has been made in the ongoing conflict between the government and the medical community, prompting the universities to expedite their revisions to the academic regulations. Chiang, let's get more on this.
Right. Before the Supreme Court of Korea dismissed an appeal filed by doctors and medical professionals last week, universities were hesitant to take further actions because the situation was uncertain. But following the Supreme Court's decision, universities are now rushing to amend their regulations to reflect the expanded medical school quota. And according to medical schools nationwide, on the 20th, universities that had either previously rejected the amendment or had not yet reviewed it, plan to complete the revision process as early as this week, but no later than the end of this month. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Education has announced that the Korean Council for University Education will convene this Friday to review changes to the 2025 academic year admission plans of universities, including the increased medical school quota.
However, the stance of the med school students remains unchanged, right?
Right. Despite the judicial decision, medical students continue to protest and refuse to attend classes. And attendance rates remain low, even in schools where in-person and online classes have resumed. Medical students from universities including Busan National University, Aju University, and Jeju National University have issued statements urging the faculty to make wise decisions to ensure the institution remains a place that trains competent and ethical doctors. And they continue to argue that they will fight by halting their studies until the complete withdrawal of the essential medical package, including the increase in medical school quota, which is the unified demand of the medical community. In response, a representative from the Ministry of Education stated that it is now impossible to retract the policy of raising med school admission seats, and the officials also emphasized that students should return to their classes before facing academic penalties, as the goal of their class boycott is no longer attainable.
Yeah, so earlier this month, Busan National University was one of the only universities that decided that after that they had a committee meeting and they said they're not going to be increasing their quotas whatsoever. And then, the government warned that they're going to be facing punitive actions if they don't go ahead and increase the quota at least 50% as they were told. But there's no updates on this. I was trying to figure out if Busan National University actually made a decision on this.
They made a decision to start reviewing it too.
Yeah, and so what happens then? Does this mean that they're forced to just go with 100% of the allotted quota, or the 50% of the allotted quota? I think initially they said they were going to go 50%, and then they backed away and said, no, forget it. We're not even going to increase it. 1% is what it is. But there's no updates on this. So this is the other thing that they have to deal with, and what these punitive measures even mean for the Busan National University. Let's move on here. South Korea and Britain co-hosting a global AI summit in Seoul starting Tuesday to address risks and opportunities associated with the rapidly evolving technology and present a framework for the global AI governance. Haejung, let's get more on this.
Right. The AI Seoul Summit, themed towards an innovative and inclusive future, will feature a mix of virtual and in-person sessions throughout Tuesday and Wednesday in Seoul. The event will draw leaders from major countries, representatives from leading tech firms, and global organizations. The AI Seoul Summit comes about 6 months after the inaugural AI Safety Summit, which was hosted by Britain at Bletchley Park in November last year, where 28 countries and the European Union adopted the Bletchley Declaration, which is the first global guideline on AI safety. Korea's Ministry of Science and ICT said that while the first AI Safety Summit focused on responses to AI-related risks, the Seoul Summit will focus on 3 priorities, which are AI safety, innovation, and inclusivity. And Seoul's presidential office is expected to draw up an agreement focusing on these 3 priorities. According to Seoul's presidential office, President Yoon has previously emphasized the importance of innovation and inclusion in establishing new digital AI norms through the New York Initiative in September 2022, the Paris Initiative last year, and the Digital Bill of Rights, and added that the international community has accepted these proposals and included them in the agenda of the AI Summit. On the first day of the event, a virtual leader session is scheduled for 90 minutes from 8:30 p.m. with President Yoon Suk Yeol and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak presiding over the summit, as well as the G7 countries participating. On the second day, which is Wednesday, an in-person meeting of digital ministers will be held, co-hosted by Korea's Science Minister Lee Jong-ho and UK Technology Secretary Michelle Donnellan. Representatives from the United Nations, OECD, as well as major tech companies, including Google, OpenAI, Microsoft, Samsung, and Naver, were also invited. In the meantime, the AI Global Forum will also be held on Wednesday, to which key industry figures are invited. The AI Global Forum will consist of a high-level roundtable and an expert session, which will be streamed live on YouTube for the public. The Global AI Forum, which was also proposed by President Yoon Suk Yeol at the UN General Assembly and the APEC Summit to establish global AI governance, is an event hosted solely by the Korean government.
Let's move on here. U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, Julie Turner. We've spoken about her previously. She's going to be visiting South Korea for 3 days. During her visit, she will again be addressing security issues and human rights violations related to North Korea through various meetings, as well as speeches. Hey, let's get more on this.
Yes, Julie Turner, the U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights, will be in South Korea from the 21st to the 25th. And she plans to explain the inseparable link between North Korea's human rights abuses and the threats to international peace and security posed by North Korea during her various speeches and meetings. Additionally, Turner will attend the Asian Leadership Conference and engage with South Korean government officials, civil society representatives, and North Korean defectors. And although she still will touch upon security issues, but since she is an expert on North Korean human rights issues, she will approach North Korean issues with a focus on people and communication this time. And in this context, she is expected to highlight the suffering of families of abductees and detainees in North Korea and the issue of separated families as well. And Turner will also visit Seonyu-do Island and Hongdo Island, sites where South Korean high school students were abducted in the 1970s. And one of the abducted students, Kim Yong-nam, who was kidnapped near Seonyu-do Island and later met and married Megumi Yokota, a symbol of Japanese abductees who disappeared in 1977 at the age of 13. And given this background, her visit also aims to address the issue of Japanese citizens abducted by North Korea.
Yeah, and so the frustrating thing is, it's almost on an annual basis that we talk about either Julie Turner coming to Korea for talks on this, or certain U.S. and South Korean officials and Japanese officials coming together and talking about North Korea-related issues on human rights. But there's no change, right? Because as long as North Korea doesn't decide that they're going to make changes, it's not going to happen, then you might be asking why then continue to bring up these issues. Well, you bring it to the international stage long enough, maybe it could also pressure China. However, China also very sensitive about human rights issues, so they've been backing up North Korea for years now. South Korea and the U.S. they began a new round of negotiations in Seoul on Tuesday on the sharing of the cost on stationing American troops here in South Korea, which, by the way, the number is 28,500, not 40,000, according to former President Trump. Haejung, let's get the latest on this.
The 3-day talks, the meeting on the so-called ROK-US Special Measures Agreement, or SMA, is set to be held until Thursday, aiming at determining how much Seoul should shoulder for the upkeep of the 28,500 United States forces Korea starting in 2026. The talks were led by Lee Tae-woo, South Korea's chief negotiator from the Foreign Ministry, and his U.S. counterpart, Linda Specht, from the U.S. State Department. The first round of talks took place in Honolulu, Hawaii last month, where the two sides confirmed their basic positions. Now, the second meeting, being held in a month, is expected to be a full-scale tug-of-war over the size of Korea's contribution and the criteria for calculating it. And the talks are coming earlier than expected amid the view that Seoul wants an early deal to avoid a potential tough bargain with Washington in case former President Donald Trump returns to the White House. Back during Trump's presidency, the SMA negotiation was a major bone of contention as he demanded a hefty rise in Korea's share of the cost for the U.S. forces in Korea. Trump had demanded Seoul pay as much as $5 billion a year. The current 6-year deal, which is the 11th SMA, is set to expire in 2025. And this deal was sealed under the Joe Biden administration. Back then, the two sides struggled for months to reach a deal before Seoul agreed to increase its contribution by 13.9% from 2019 to $1.03 billion for 2021 and increase the payment every year for the subsequent 4 years to reflect the rise in Seoul's defense spending. FYI, Seoul has been shouldering the costs of deploying U.S. troops in Korea starting in the early 1990s, and the costs are used to fund local labor, the construction of military installations, and other logistics support. And upon announcing the SMA meeting schedule, Seoul's foreign ministry has called for a new deal at a reasonable level to ensure the conditions for stable stationing of U.S. forces and to strengthen the combined defense posture. Meanwhile, Washington has said it seeks to pursue a fair and equitable outcome in the talks, saying that the SMA negotiations are about the importance of the alliance and support for one another.
Yeah, I think one of the arguments that the U.S. was using is, listen, I mean, yeah, we might be asking for a little bit more for you guys to contribute to the sharing of the cost, but that money goes back into your economy anyway, so it's a win-win situation, I think is one of the arguments that's being used, which, by the way, doesn't seem too bad. But again, we're not, I mean, even a 13.9% is a pretty big increase. But I think it worked in the favor of the United States when Trump is going, I want $5 billion. And then like all of a sudden you get 13.9% and it seems so little, right? Like $1.03 billion US dollars seems so little compared to $5 billion. And they were able to get that increase previously. This is an interesting one, although I feel like it's more symbolic than anything. There's nothing really more to it, except it's really it's upset a number of people, by the way. The International Criminal Court simultaneously requesting arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Hamas leadership, this including the Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, I believe his name is. Both parties are accused of war crimes and crimes against humanity, all the things that happened after the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel. Haejung, let's get more on this.
The war between Israel and Hamas has claimed approximately 35,000 lives so far. And after 7 months of conflict, the ICC has issued a strong condemnation of the leadership on both sides. And arrest warrants have been requested for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, and 3 Hamas leaders, Sinwar, Deif, and Hania, on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. And specifically, Israel is accused of deliberately and systematically depriving civilians in Gaza of essentials necessary for survival. And Hamas is held responsible for murder, hostage-taking, and sexual crimes. And the matter is now in the hands of the ICC's pre-trial chamber, consisting of 3 judges. And if arrest warrants are issued, it becomes theoretically possible to secure the suspects. But Israel argues that it is not under the ICC's jurisdiction, as it is not a member state, and the United States, which is also an ally of Israel and is not part of the ICC, is also taking this issue with a similar stance. So it remains to be seen whether the ICC's ruling will actually take effect.
Yeah, I think some of the countries that are not in the ICC membership is not just the United States, like China's not in it, which is why Putin, right? There's an ICC arrest warrant on him, and he was able to go to China recently. It's possible because China is not part of the ICC, and even if they're part of the ICC, they're not going to arrest.
We can estimate why is not part of ICC, right?
Yes. There are many reasons, and there's also many reasons why Russia is not part of the ICC.
Similar reasons
as well. Well, we mentioned that the U.S. is not part of the ICC. There's also many reasons for that, too. U.S. President Joe Biden criticizing the ICC decision, calling it outrageous that it's seeking to arrest Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders, including Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, stressed that there is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. Hae-Jung-Yeol, let's get some remarks from the U.S. side.
Sure. The Biden administration on Monday local time forcefully denounced efforts by the International Criminal Court to seek arrest warrants for top Israeli officials and Hamas leaders, saying the court's efforts to put the terrorist organization and a top U.S. ally on equivalent footing does not make sense. President Joe Biden and Secretary of State Antony Blinken released statements on Monday, fundamentally rejecting the announcement from the chief prosecutor of the ICC. Biden called the ICC's efforts outrageous. In a statement, he said, quote unquote, "Let me be clear. Whatever this prosecutor might imply, there is no equivalence, none, between Israel and Hamas." He added that the trauma of October 7th and its aftermath, the deadliest day the Jewish people have undergone since the Holocaust, is still fresh and ongoing. Secretary of State Blinken also wrote, "We reject the prosecutor's equivalence of Israel and Hamas," and called the arrest warrant announcement shameful for equating Israel and Hamas. The Biden administration officials also questioned whether the ICC had the jurisdiction to seek those arrests, and said the decision by the ICC is not only unhelpful but could jeopardize ongoing efforts to reach a ceasefire agreement that would allow for the release of hostages and expand humanitarian aid. In the meantime, the United States official response on the death of Iranian President Abraham Raisi came from the State Department. A short 2-sentenced statement expressed condolences and expressed support for the struggle for freedom with the election of a new president. But the briefing emphasized that it does not change its assessment of President Raisi, who was responsible for some of the worst human rights abuses, nor does it change the country's stance toward Iran.
You know, we covered what Biden had said in regards to the ICC's seeking the arrest warrant. Should have heard what Netanyahu had to say. He went on really a long speech in regards to this. I'm going to read some of this stuff. The absurd and deceitful warrant of the prosecutor in The Hague is aimed not only against Israel's prime minister, he talked to himself in a second person, by the way, and defense minister. It is aimed against the entire state of Israel. It is aimed against the IDF soldiers who are fighting with the utmost bravery against the vile murderers of Hamas who attacked us with horrendous brutality on October 7th. And that's not even all. I think this was the biggest one here. He said it will cast an everlasting mark of shame on the international court. Israel is waging a just war against Hamas, a genocidal terrorist organization that perpetrated the worst attack of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Hamas massacred 1,200 Jews, raped Jewish women, burned Jewish babies, took hundreds hostages. Now, in the face of this, Mr. Khan, who, by the way, is the chief prosecutor of the ICC, creates a twisted and false moral equivalence between the leaders of Israel and the henchmen of Hamas. But again, the argument now being used against Netanyahu, and I think there was already a lot of people, there was even, what was it, the U.S. was thinking about whether or not they were going to sanction Israel, right? Well, the IDF, I think it was, they were going to sanction because of some of the things that were going on in Gaza right now. And then you think about 35,000 Palestinians that I think were killed so far in total, right?
Right.
And so the argument was how many then Hamas soldiers were killed during this, right? There's no figures on this. So, and why was there so many innocent civilians that were killed in the process? And so it gets ugly right now. But again,
some of the crimes listed by the Netanyahu is what Israel has done to people in Palestine.
That's what the Palestinians are saying, and that's what the Hamas is saying right now, and some of the supporters of Palestine. And remember, this is not a Israel-Palestine war, right? It's an Israel-Hamas war. I think this is the most important thing. However, the unfortunate side effect of this was that more civilians were killed in the process of this. But again, the ICC arrest warrant means very little because no one is going to arrest anybody. It just means like maybe there might be some like limitations in the overseas travels, but we'll see what happens. Guys, thank you very much for coming in with your reports today. Have a safe rest of your night, and we'll see you guys again.
Thank you.
You can listen to Korea Now with me, SJ Lee, by downloading the Arirang radio application or tune in online by visiting www.arirangradio.com. So make sure you tune in Mondays through Fridays, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Korea time.